Oh, I forgot to turn my own lights on. Thanks, Ty. All right. Thank you all for being here this evening. Tonight I want to talk about the idea of the Lord is my shepherd, which is probably one of the most enduring images in the Bible. It's a phrase that I'm guessing most of us have heard many, many times. It's the first line of Psalm 23. And it's a beautiful image of God's care and His providence. And in that one line, right, we have so much imagery, so much of an idea, especially for anybody who's grown up in the church, all of this ideas of loving relationship that God has with us, that He'll take care of us, that He'll protect us, that He'll give us what we need and guide us where we need to go. But just a non-biblical question for a second. How do you know that that's what a shepherd is like? Because I don't know about you, but I've spent like almost zero time around sheep or shepherds in my life. I have one story with sheep. I was in New Zealand and we saw a bunch of sheep on a hillside. I think they were in somebody else's like enclosed pen, but we decided to climb in and become shepherds for a moment. And so we chased them around the mountains for a few minutes and got them to. You can kind of hurt them, like if you actually like run around and yell at them enough and but some of them just wouldn't move. They knew not to listen to us. We were idiots. We were stupid kids. So that's my one sheep story. That's literally like the one time in my life that I've been around a sheep instead of like a petting zoo. So I don't spend much time around sheep. I'm going to go ahead and go out on a limb and say that most of you guys don't know any like shepherds or spend a whole lot of time around sheep. Maybe somebody here grew up on a farm. I don't know all of your backstories, but the Bible is full of references to us human beings as sheep, to God as a shepherd, and it's an image that I think we need to understand better, but we misunderstand because we don't know sheep. So this isn't going to be a lesson on sheep, but I do want to dive into that a little bit, because in Isaiah 53, it says, "All we like sheep have gone astray. We have turned every one to our own way. The Lord is our shepherd, and we are our sheep." And, of course, the idea of being sheep, as we conceive it, is not a very flattering idea, right? We tend to think of sheep as dumb and defenseless and gullible. And in our culture today, there's a lot of like language around, calling other people sheep, wake up, sheeple. The idea of like just blindly following. And that's kind of like the image that we have of sheep, that they're just blindly following something or someone false, or just whatever comes along, they'll follow it. So, why in the world does the Bible call us sheep and God the shepherd? Is that what we're supposed to be, just blindly following and following whatever comes along and that sort of thing? So I'm going to start us off in John chapter 10, verses 1 through 5, as we kind of start to look at what it actually means for God to be our shepherd and for us to be sheep. So Jesus is talking in John chapter 10, and he says, "Very truly I tell you, Pharisees, anyone who does not enter the sheep pen by the gate, but climbs in by some other way, is a thief and a robber. The one who enters by the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep listen to his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all his own, he goes on ahead of them, and his sheep follow him because they know his voice. But they will never follow a stranger. In fact, they will run away from him because they do not recognize a stranger's voice." One of the first things to notice here is that sheep distinguish between different voices. Sheep know who their shepherd is, and they flee from people who are not supposed to be, right? I can speak from my one brief experience that sheep did not want to listen to me and my friends when we were trying to shepherd them around. They know when you're not the shepherd. And so people tend to think of sheep as gullible and easy to control, but oftentimes the opposite is true. Sheep are not lemmings who will just follow each other off of a cliff. They know danger when they see it. They recognize their shepherd, they won't listen to others, and they run away from dangerous people and dangerous situations. And that, of course, is an image of who we're supposed to be as followers of Jesus. We recognize the voice of God, who's our shepherd. We flee other voices that tell us lies and try to lead us to sin and evil. Unfortunately, I think the sheep might have us beat in this one a little bit. We do follow other voices a lot of the time, and we do go astray quite often. It seems like we're often running towards things that are dangerous instead of running away from them. Perhaps here we need to maybe take a lesson from sheep a little bit, spend some more time getting to know the voice of our shepherd. But of course, because we need to get to know the voice of our shepherd, this parable tells us something about our shepherd as well. Essentially that God is talking to us. He does speak. In order for us to know the shepherd's voice, he would need to be talking, and we would need to be able to hear. And so God is speaking to us in many ways most of the time. God can be speaking to you through time in prayer, time in the Bible, of course, but also through friends, mentors. Maybe occasionally I say something up here that's God speaking. I don't know. I don't want to speak for him. But through pastors, through friends, through mentors, through random people you meet on the street, through occasional happenstance, God is speaking in everything around us. And it's up to us to simply turn on our ears, to train ourselves to listen and to start recognizing the voice of God everywhere. Despite the fact, of course, though, that sheep aren't as gullible as people make them out to be, they are pretty dumb still. It's still not a flattering metaphor to be called a sheep. You can't train a sheep to do tricks for you or be your house pet. They have a tendency to wander away. They just sort of see some grass that they like and they go pecking at it, and then they look up and they realize, oh, the whole rest of the flock is gone and I don't know which way they went. And so that's just something that sheep do. And in the Gospel of Luke, Jesus tells us a parable. He says, suppose one of you has 100 sheep and loses one of them. Doesn't he leave the 99 in the open country, go after the lost sheep until he finds it? And when he finds it, he joyfully puts it on his shoulders and goes home. Then he calls his friends and neighbors together and says, rejoice with me, I have found my lost sheep. I tell you that in the same way there will be more rejoicing in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who do not need to repent. Once again, we have another parable that teaches us something about the sheep, or us, and about the shepherd, which is God. So what we learn about us can be summed up in the same verse from Isaiah that I quoted a couple of minutes ago. All we are like sheep who go astray and follow our own way. It turns out that as opposed to the common metaphor, the common idea of sheep are notoriously bad at following. They're really bad at listening to instruction. They just wander away. They constantly don't do what they're supposed to. And the same is true, of course, for us. We follow God well until we get distracted by something, and then we wander away, and then all of a sudden we realize we're totally lost. We don't know what's going on, and we seem far away from God again. But the good news, the part of this parable that tells us about our shepherd, is that he will come rescue us. The parable of the lost sheep is about rejoicing over a sinner who returns to God. And it's in the same chapter. It's in a series of parables that includes the parable of the prodigal son, who comes home and is restored. But unlike the parable of the prodigal son, where the son first comes home and God or the father runs out to meet him, in this parable, the sheep is just lost. And the shepherd goes out and he finds him and he puts him on his shoulders and brings him home. God comes to rescue his flock when we're lost. He saved us through Jesus, and he saves us over and over again by putting people and things in our lives that will lead us back to him, that will draw us back to him. And we often turn away from God, even when we know better, but God always comes back to find us. God doesn't leave us alone and separated from the pack. And now I want to return to Psalm 23 that I opened with. David, who, as far as we know, wrote this psalm, was a shepherd before he became king of Israel. As a kid, he was a shepherd, and so he knew a couple of things about taking care of sheep and what that life was like. There are stories in the Bible of David protecting his sheep from wild animals, using his bare hands, animals that tried to attack and kill his sheep. The life of a shepherd is not easy, it's not glamorous, and David knew all about that. And then as king, he wrote these words about God. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. And that, as I said at the beginning of the sermon, that's a beautiful picture of God's care for us. In that first line, we're told, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. That word want in this context means lack or need. So David's saying, because God is my shepherd, I have everything that I need. I'm not going to need anything. God will take care of us and give us the things that we need. He will lead us where we need to go and make us rest when we're tired. Most importantly, God will protect us from evil. His rod and his staff will keep us from danger. The rod was a weapon, essentially, to use against attacking animals. And the staff would keep sheep in line. You could kind of pull them back in. Or you could lift them out of a valley or something if they kind of tumbled into a little ditch on the side of the road. So the rod and the staff comforting him, these items of protection, these items of warding off the bad things, both self-inflicted and from the outside. And there's one more passage I want to read tonight to kind of close out all these passages that talk about us as sheep and God as our shepherd. And I think it tells us the most important truth about God as our shepherd. So it's back in John 10 again, a few verses later from what I read earlier, verses 11 through 15. This is Jesus talking once again. He says, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand is not the shepherd and does not own the sheep. So when he sees the wolf coming, he abandons the sheep and runs away. Then the wolf attacks the flock and scatters it. The man runs away because he is a hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep, and my sheep know me, just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. So twice in that passage, Jesus tells us he will lay down his life for us. We are the sheep, Jesus is the shepherd. We've already seen that the shepherd speaks to his sheep, finds his sheep, cares for his sheep. Now we can see that the shepherd will even sacrifice himself for his flock. Jesus, who is God in the flesh, laid down his life so that we could be safe from danger. Jesus gave his life so that we didn't have to die, but could live forever with God. And there's a whole other, I was thinking about this while Stephen sang the last song. There's a whole other subplot of this that I could get into that I'm not going to go down this rabbit trail tonight. And that's talking about Jesus becoming man and then being the Lamb of God who was crucified. And I'm going to leave that untouched for now, although there's probably some exciting things that we could explore in that idea. But even just speaking about it, I can say that the idea of Jesus as a person, he's both at once the good shepherd and the sheep. And the good shepherd who lays down his life and the sheep who is that sacrifice for sins from the Old Testament covenant. But again, that's a little bit off the track of where we're going tonight. Jesus gave his life so that we don't have to die, so that we could live forever with God. That's the important thing. There's only one true good shepherd. People sometimes look to pastors as shepherds, but often, honestly, we're nothing more than the hired hands that Jesus talks about. When the chips are down, we fail a lot of the time. People sometimes look to political leaders or celebrities or even the moral heroes of our past, Martin Luther King Jr., Gandhi, people like that people put on these pedestals as sort of the inspirational leaders, the shepherds, if you will, our guides. But the truth is, no other shepherd can do what God can do. Every other possible person to put in head of your life will fail you in one way or another. There's just nobody's perfect. But God will care for us. He'll protect us. He'll lay down his life for us even. So after all of this, after looking at all these passages, I hope that it's clear that the Bible does not call us sheep in order to insult us. We're sheep because God is the shepherd. We do often go astray, and we do sometimes ignore the voice of our master. We're often helpless in the face of danger. But God, the one who made us and knows us, will protect us and he'll care for us. God, the good shepherd, will give us everything we need. He'll guide us through the darkest valleys and towards the peaceful streams. Our task is to listen for the voice of the shepherd so that we can know God better and know what he wants for our lives, the direction he's taking us. And then it's to follow, to hear that voice and then to follow Jesus with our lives so that we stray less often. And finally, it's to trust in God, knowing that he's going to care for us and protect us and give us what we need. And now, let's spend some time in prayer with one another.